This is an unprecedented U.S. election during unprecedented times. A global pandemic, a racial reckoning, and now a Supreme Court vacancy. Still, it all comes down to this.
This election is about one thing and one thing only.
It's Donald Trump.
Donald Trump.
Tonight, the first debate.
I'm looking for Joe Biden to be incredibly strong with the facts.
I'll be looking at whether the candidates are able to lay out clear themes for their campaigns.
A campaign with implications for Canada on policy, trade, and so much more.
What I want Canadians to know is just how consequential this next election will be.
More than 600,000 eligible U.S. voters live in Canada. That's a number that could make a difference when the ballots are counted. So we've gathered our own U.S. political panel to help you through these next 5 weeks.
My name's Yasha Monk. I come at this election as a scholar of populist movements around the world.
My name is Danielle Moody, and my hope is for a Biden-Harris win.
I'm Daniel McCarthy. I'm a conservative and will be voting for Donald Trump on November 3rd.
All right, so joining me now, Daniel McCarthy, editor of Modern Age Journal and columnist for The Spectator. Danielle Moody, the host of the podcast Woke AF Daily and co-host of the podcast Democracy-ish. And Yasha Monk is a contributing editor at The Atlantic and associate professor at Johns Hopkins University. Thank you all for being here. Daniel, Danielle, I see no problems mixing these up. Yasha, though, I'd like to start with you. Very cranky evening, it appears. Who do you think had the best night?
I don't know, but I think that, the average age in the United States has gone up by about 3 years in the last 2 hours. Look, I think it's a very messy draw. I think nobody was able to get out a full sentence or two, and that's mostly because Donald Trump interrupted Joe Biden every 10 seconds. But I think a draw probably favors Joe Biden. He's been ahead in the polls. Donald Trump really needed to change the dynamic of the race tonight, and I don't think that he has done that.
So, Daniel, Trump is known, obviously, as a showman on television. He loves the stage. How do you think he performed?
I think he may have overplayed his hand somewhat here. American voters are not eager for the amount of excitement, perhaps, that they saw on the stage tonight. I could be wrong about that, however. I mean, Donald Trump is taking a big risk here, but his whole campaign back in 2016 was built on risks, and his campaign in 2020 seems to be willing to continue to push the envelope. But I think he may have gone a little too farther than most voters are willing to accept anyway.
Speaking of going far, Danielle, Joe Biden, as you know, said a little while ago that he knew he couldn't be baited into a brawl. His words, I can't be baited into a brawl with this guy. So if I may, let me play this moment we have from earlier on in the debate, and then I'll ask you about it.
Let people know you're a senator. I'm not going to answer the question.
Why
because,
would you answer that
because
question?
the question is the question is
Justice,
the
radical
question,
left.
Will you shut up, man?
Listen, who?
Will you shut up, man? So how'd you feel when you saw that, Danielle?
I felt that Joe Biden was essentially expressing everything that Americans have been feeling for the past 4 years. Look, Donald Trump was very clear tonight that he does not care about the American public. He does not care about climate change. He does not care about escalating racism. He does not care about the future of this country. What Donald Trump cares about is Donald Trump. Not even a sentence did he utter that was not dripping with condensation for the American public. Everything that he said, everything that he offered was about him and how great he is, how smart he is, that he doesn't pay taxes. Millions of Americans struggle each year to pay their taxes, but they do because they're paying into the American dream, which Donald Trump told them tonight was stupid, right, for them to do. So I think that I don't think that it was a draw tonight. I think that Joe Biden showed what he needed to show was that he's the adult in the room.
Daniel, let's talk about taxes for a second, about the revelations that Trump paid only $750. I'm going to play a clip, and then I'd really like you to weigh in on this, please.
Will you tell us how much you paid in federal income taxes in 2016 and 2017?
Millions of dollars.
You paid millions of dollars?
Millions of dollars,
So
yes.
not 750.
Millions of dollars, and you'll get to see it. And you'll get to see it. But let me just tell you, Chris, let me just tell you something, that it was the tax laws. I don't want to pay tax. Before I came here, I was a private developer. I was a private business people. Like every other private person, unless they're stupid, they go through the laws, and that's what it is.
Daniel, what did you make of how he handled that moment? Was it enough?
Myself?
Yes, sorry. Daniel McCarthy, yes.
I think it was enough. Again, Americans understand the way business works, and they understand that if you have the kind of resources that Donald Trump has, your revenues and your outflows are going to be irregular. In some years, you're going to have more income, and some years you're going to have losses, and that there's going to be different tax effects based on what your business is doing.
Yasha, do you believe that? Do you think Americans accept that?
I don't. Look, I think a lot of the reason why Donald Trump won in 2016 is that people sort of believed his promises. They didn't think that all of the great things he was promising would come true, but they thought, you know what, this guy's a successful businessman, and he's done all these great things in his life, and he's telling us our country will be great. Let's give it a shot. Perhaps he'll really deliver on some of it. And for the last 4 years, they've seen that he hasn't delivered. They've seen how badly the United States has dealt with COVID compared, for example, to Canada. They don't feel like they're better off today than they are 4 years ago. And I think a lot of them are starting to suspect that perhaps they were the mark, that perhaps Donald Trump is a little bit of a con man. And in terms of his taxes, he has two choices. Either he's a much less good businessman than he has claimed, or he cheated on his taxes, costing the average American a lot of money. Neither of those look particularly good, and he certainly hasn't been able to talk himself out of that dilemma today.
I'd like to talk about COVID a bit. It was one of the topics today, although it is the topic of our time. Danielle, were you satisfied with what you heard from Biden on the pandemic tonight?
Yeah, I think that Joe Biden did a very good job of weaving in the pandemic to every conversation that was being had. Look, we are in the middle of a global pandemic, and to pretend that it was going to be siloed to one topic of discussion was foolish. 205,000 Americans are dead on Donald Trump's watch. And he hasn't answered for that. He hasn't told us why he doesn't believe in science or follow the data or follow his own doctors' warnings. And I think that Joe Biden reminded the American people today of that with COVID, if you've contracted COVID and you've been able to survive it, you now have a pre-existing condition. Donald Trump isn't talking about that either. So I think that Joe Biden did a very good job of creating a boomerang effect, that everything that Wallace, the moderator, offered, that he would bring it back to COVID.
Daniel, I suspect that's not how you see it at all, particularly in terms of the president's handling the pandemic.
Well, it's not. And I have to say, I don't think Joe Biden had a very clear plan as to how he's going to deal with COVID. And it seems to me that one of the things he had to do was say, OK, you've had this situation happen under Donald Trump. If I were president, if Joe Biden were president, you would have a dramatically different result. And I don't think there was anything clear enough on that point being expressed by the vice president tonight.
So let's talk about another issue that came up, because they really went through a whole bunch of them. Crucially, the Supreme Court. You know, Yasha, for someone who lives across the border, how critical is this to Americans, particularly to those deciding where to put a vote?
Well, it seems to me that it's very, very critical to Americans who are very clearly on the left or very clearly on the right. Control of the Supreme Court is extremely important to conservatives who hope to be able to undo a whole bunch of legislation, including obviously most important Roe v. Wade, the Supreme Court case that granted abortion rights as a matter of federal law. Liberals want to preserve Roe v. Wade and be able to make more progress on things like campaign finance and so on. And so to those political activists, this issue is incredibly important. I wonder whether those who are undecided or those who are in the middle think about these things as much. Those tend to be voters who are less politically engaged, less politically informed. And to them, the question of the Supreme Court and the seat and who is this Amy Coney Barrett and who was this Ruth Bader Ginsburg may seem a lot more abstract than it does to political junkies like the people on this panel and like myself.
Okay, time for one last question to each of you, so we'll keep it brief if we can. We'll start with you, Daniel McCarthy. Is it your sense that this debate, I guess, mattered?
Well, I don't know. I mean, it may have marginally shifted people into Biden's camp, but it may also have simply upset the apple cart so much that it's now a completely different style of American politics that's going to prevail. And clearly, if it is this kind of hardball, very aggressive style of politics, Donald Trump plays that much more strongly than anyone else does. It's a question of whether he's changed the rules of the game.
Danielle, just a few seconds to you. Sorry about that.
No, I don't think that the debate was incredibly consequential. I think that it was infuriating. And so maybe anger will be what motivates people to the polls.
Interesting. And Yasha? Last word to you.
It mattered because it didn't matter. It mattered because it doesn't change the dynamics of a race, and that's helpful to Joe Biden.
All right, thank you all, Danielle McCarthy, Danielle Moody, and Yasha Monk. And we will be back next Wednesday, same time, same place, to tackle the vice presidential debate, Kamala Harris versus Mike Pence.